Today's episode is brought to you by FirmTech. All right, folks, sitting down with Chris Thrall. Let me tell you right now, folks, we're not going to get into everything that he's done on this show because there's far too much. And if Chris will come back on the show later, I'm sure we'll be able to do something to cover the gaps. We went over a bunch of different stuff on his show. So we'll be dropping the links to his show. I was, graciously accepted his invitation to chat on his show. So now he's chatting with us here in the Hard to Kill community, just to give you an idea of what Chris has been up to. Chris is a veteran, by the way. He's in the UK and he has done a quadruple Ironman, but there's more. He ran an ultra marathon a day for 36 days. So from one tip of Britain down to the other tip. And he's done 2 marathons across the Sahara, which I just learned that wasn't it. He actually did like 5 marathons before he did the double marathon across the Sahara. And he just casually rode across the Atlantic Ocean. So if you're thinking like, what kind of superhuman is this? Like, what are we talking about here? Well, it's Chris, and he's sitting right here, right now. He's the most humble British man I've ever talked to. And it's absolute honor to have you on the show, Chris. How you doing, buddy?
Dave, I'm very well, brother. It's great to see you again so soon. I think that, you mentioned these things, and thank you for the very big up in your intro. But for me, that's just stuff that I do. What I like is that when you came on my show, we're 2 veterans that are awake and we're on the enlightenment path, and we're not fooled by all the BS in the media. And there's a lot of veterans like us, and it definitely seems to be elite forces. We do our time, and then we sort of like wake up. Do you know what I mean? We joined up because we weren't stupid, although we were probably a bit naive and
I would push back on you that, sitting in a hole for weeks on end, getting rained on you're not the brightest human being. You could be, studying math,
Exactly. But yeah, that's what I like. I like these relationships. There's a lot of stuff coming out now in the global community. I think people are becoming less and less afraid to call out what's going on. People are, as David Icke would say, they're joining the dots now. I don't know if there's any kind of majority there or whether there ever will be. There's a lot of people out there that are still, it's not just that society is really dumbing down and getting de-skilled and losing community, and people, they have no etiquette now. They don't know how to stand up and introduce themselves when someone walks in a room or say hello and, passing by in the street. All of that's been drummed out of people with the constant fear narrative. Mm-hmm. But my point is like, I don't care about that. What I care about is if there's one person I can have a good chat with, we might not all see the same thing from the same way, but we understand that there's something else there, and there's more to life. And so, along with the adventuring, I'm probably a bit of an anomaly, really, because I like to do really good stuff, adventurous stuff, but then I'm also fascinated on the enlightenment journey, and I like to understand what's going on in the world and why we've ended up in a bizarre situation where the TV, right, a black box in the corner of the room, can lock people in their homes for like almost 2 years. That is insane. When you read that in George Orwell's 1984, you thought, just a book. Yeah, just a book, During all of that nonsense, Dave, I didn't get a single letter through the door from either the government or a health organization like our National Health Service. No, it was independent broadcasters who told everybody what they will do, and everyone went along with it, conveniently overlooking the fact or not even understanding the fact that the TV is just the mouthpiece of the merchants, this dark global network of big money people and other dark interests. And, I just think life's too short not to figure this stuff out. Why would you not want to know it? So there you go.
Well, Chris, let's rewind a little bit. What was the motivation? I mean, sure, we might have a few screws loose, join the military. Like, you don't have to, but we all felt a force. In my case, I was in college and I just thought it would be a great way to make some cash on the side. I was a reservist, wear a cool uniform, shoot some guns, and follow in my grandfather's footsteps. But in the back of my mind too, I'm like, man, I can't find a girl to save my life. Maybe this will be the thing. Like, I'll get a girlfriend from this, right? Worst strategy ever. However, I found something I truly loved, which was being a soldier. So, what got you into soldiering, and then ultimately, what led you to the point now where you're doing incredible feats of endurance, and you're also raising awareness for, and we haven't even got into that, the fact that you're raising awareness for suicide prevention for veterans, and you're doing a lot of good from what I can see. Not everybody wants to do that, and not everybody wants to be awake. So, what was that journey like for you?
Wow.
All right, guys, we need to talk about your dick. Not in a jokey locker room way, but in a life-saving way. You see, erectile dysfunction isn't just a bedroom issue. It's one of the earliest warning signs of cardiovascular disease. And veterans, we're at a higher risk than civilians. TBIs, stress, meds, pain, poor sleep, you name it. That's where FirmTech comes in. They make the world's first smart erection ring, and it's kind of a game changer. It's called the Tech Ring, and you wear it overnight while you sleep, and it tracks your nocturnal erections. That's right, real data right to your phone. Wondering what meds, supplements, or diet changes actually work? Now you'll actually know, because when you track it, you can hack it. Discreet, easy to use. You can even wear it during sex to enhance your intimate moments with the missus. They call it the dick bit, and yeah, it actually works. In fact, rings are more effective than pills that you'll get from the VA. And FirmTech's Tech Ring, it's research proven, effective, safe, no side effects, just results. So if you're serious about your health and your performance and maybe a few better rolls in the hay, resolve in 2025 to put a ring on it. No shame in that game, sir. Use code DMorrow at checkout for 15% off your first purchase. Link is in the description.
My new book, Harden to Fuck Up, was written as a guide for anybody that follows a podcast and wants to put together all the things that they've learned from amazing guests. It is Dallas Alexander approved. Tim Jensen from Grunstyle wrote the foreword. And if you want to lose weight, you want to get a grip of your health, your waistline, and your mental health this year, I strongly recommend going to Amazon and getting your ebook, audiobook, or paperback copy immediately. Would love to hear a review, and train hard, fight easy. Let's get back to the episode.
Okay, so challenging, let's say, and very dark at times. So I had your archetypal, I'm just going to call it a challenging childhood, and that's a youth, that's putting it really mildly, and what it resulted in is I went to 6 schools before the age of 11, I think. 6 lots of bullies you've got to fight, 6 lots of teachers in back in my day. The teachers weren't the nice people that they have to be now. Teachers had their own rule back then. If they wanted to belt the shit out of you because they felt like it, there was no one, not even your parents, would challenge it. So lot of violence back then, and I ended up homeless for the first time at 15. My parents had numerous separations and remarriages and this kind of thing. And I was homeless for the first time in my school uniform, which is just not really a good situation. And standing in a phone box thinking, am I going to be sleeping in this phone box tonight? And then do you guys say phone kiosk, or is it?
No, we would know what that is.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then the second time I was homeless, I was 17. I had a car by then, and so I was sleeping in my car. I had all my gear in my car. Anyway, my buddy came up, knocked on the window, and he said, I've just joined the Royal Marines, the Royal Marines Commandos, the toughest infantry force training on the planet, and you couldn't do it. And because of my stroppiness, I wasn't like a bad kid, but I had my moments, and I thought, you don't tell me what to do. And his dad was a real, quote unquote war hero from the Falklands conflict. And so I looked at him, I said, oh, yes, I could. And what I did, we were at a New Year's Eve party at his house, and he consequently put me up for a couple of nights. And I left the party at midnight, and we lived on the moorland, the sticks, you can say. And there was a big rock feature. People thought it was like a meteorite that had come down, this really bizarre rock feature just sticking out the landscape. And it was half a mile there and half a mile back. And there's me in my drunken state. I've been stubbing out, probably my 20th cigarette for the day. And I said, right, if I can run up around that rock and back 1 mile, or so 1.6 kilometers, and not stop, I'll go down the recruitment office after the Christmas holiday. And if I do stop, I'm not even going to waste the Royal Marines' time, And that was it. I was dying. I was wheezing, single-handedly. That 1 mile day was probably the hardest run I think I ever had to do thereabouts. And when I got up to that rock, and I've still got half a mile to get home, everything was screaming at me, stop. This isn't for you. What are you doing? Because I never had any support. Well, I didn't have a massive support growing up, Dave. And this is the mirror now reflecting those voices back at me, right? So my shadow, as Carl Jung would say, is reflecting my experience of life, which is I was told I was a failure at everything. School said I was a failure. Family said, ha, you think the Royal Marines would want someone like you? This is my own parents, for crying out loud. And deep inside, there was a little voice that said, no, I am not giving up, because somehow I knew if I gave up on that 1 mile run, I'd be giving up the whole rest of my life. And I just knew it couldn't be an option. And I finished that run, went down to the recruiting office. He said, hop up on that bar, do some pull-ups. So I hopped up on this bar and I did 30 pull-ups.
Shoot, wow.
And then he says, get down in this kind of voice. And this is like a Royal Marines color sergeant or sergeant major or something. And it started, that thing in the military where you think you failed. It had already started before I'd even joined. In that recruiting, I thought, Christ, I bet everybody else does like
50.
50 or 60, and I've failed already. And I honestly didn't know at the time that most people struggle to do 6 pull-ups. Some people couldn't even do one.
Yeah.
So this kind of like, I got a little bit of a legend already sort of, going there for this pull-up thing. And anyway, I hung in there in training. You do a 3-day course just to get into the Marines. On that 3-day course, you technically do most of the commando tests. You just do them in light order, with boots and fatigues. You don't carry a weapon or webbing. And coming from my background, and I think I'd done probably 6 days training or something. I was never really good at putting time aside for that kind of thing. So yeah. I still didn't really have any kind of great fitness or anything. But same thing again, I couldn't give up. And the proudest moment of my life, overwhelmingly, like more proud than when my son was born, and he's the biggest legend in my life. But the proudest moment was after that 3 days. They called us into a room. We'd started off with about 15 guys. One guy fell off the ropes, collapsed unconscious. He was gone. Another guy just walked, a couple of guys walk away. And basically it whittled it down to sort of 8 people in that room or some such figure. And then he called like 2 of the guys in. 3 or 4 minutes later, they came out. They didn't say a word to us. They just marched straight on by and went and got the train. I'm there thinking, that's it. those two guys have passed. We've all failed, haven't we? They called the next, two guys in. They came out, same thing, didn't say a word, off they went. And then there wasn't many of us left. There's 2 or 3, maybe 4, doesn't really matter. And we came up into the room. There was no get to attention or anything. We were just civilians still. Mm-hmm. And this color sergeant just looked up at us and said, "Pat yourselves on the backs, fellas. You've just joined the Royal Marines." I tell you what, it was the proudest moment of my life. And I hate the fucking military. I'm being facetious. I hate the way it's been used. Obviously, I'm very proud of the Royal Marines and, always will be, but I'm not, you can't live through 9/11 and not wake up, for Christ's sake, So that was it. I went home on the train and I was on like a cloud 9, like I'd never been on before, and I just could not wait to tell my father, who'd said they don't want you, that yes, they did want me, and I proved myself, Dad, and so that was that. And the next thing I found myself in the Northern Ireland conflict. We had a particularly, I think the word for it these days is kinetic tour. Lots of things going bang, lots of petrol bombs, blast bombs, IEDs, mortars, kidnappings, kneecappings, shootings, snipings, buses set on fire, riots. We had the lot, and it was pretty hectic. We moved to a new base. We were at one base, and we were something called the Commando Reserve. Us new guys out of training joined the engineers troop in the Marines, in 4-2 Commando Royal Marines. And we were called the Floating Reserve, and they wanted us to go over to Lima Company and support Lima Company because it was the voting night in Belfast. And the IRA have always traditionally, obviously, tried to interrupt the voting because it's a quote unquote British process. So we joined this new territory, had no idea of the ground. So they gave us what they call a continuity officer, who's a guy left over from the unit before, because we'd only been there 2 weeks anyway. And he came out with us, this army chap. He said, "Right, fellas, we're going to head, we've been briefed on the Ardoin, going to patrol up this way, da-da-da-da." And we got to this park, and he said, "Right, break in a diamond formation." So the 4 of us we called it a brick, which is half a section size. Mm-hmm. The 4 of us broke into a diamond, and this Conco was right at the front. And just as the tail end Charlie stepped foot on the grass, we suddenly heard bang, 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 bang. And this gunman, I say gunman because he had an AK-47, so he couldn't really be classed as a sniper, but this gunman, they'd taken a family hostage earlier in the day from the back of the Ardoin. He'd set up a shoot from their top window, and as soon as we stepped on the grass, he'd opened up on us. So I just remember hearing our brick commander, Corporal, shout, "Take cover, taking cover." And you could hear our cocking mechanisms echoing all off the walls around this park. I'll never forget it. And we legged it across the park and dived behind this kind of outbuilding. And when I look back, Jock, as I call him in my book, who was right at the back of the patrol, he was spark out on the grass on his front. His equipment, his electronic equipment and his rifle had flown off him. And I'm there as the first aider, and look, I've got to go and get him. That's why we did all those fireman's carry drills in training. Was this is that moment. So as I started to run back, the team were just screaming at me, "Chris, get down!" I'm cutting out all the expletives here for the sake of your podcast. "Chris, get down!" And I'm like, "How the hell can I do that?" As I went out to get George, his head popped up and his eyes were like saucers. You could see that he was in shock. All the adrenaline was flowing, and he just grabbed his equipment and come running over. And he said, "I'm hit, I'm hit, I'm hit." And I'm ripping open his parachute smock, and I'm ripping open his Eniba vest, the bulletproof, blast-proof vest.
Mhm.
And I'm like, Jock, you're not in hit. He's go, I am. And anyway, cut the long story short, the second he'd stepped onto the grass, and he's obviously facing backwards because he's at the back of the patrol, this gunman had opened up. The first round had taken the antenna off his electric equipment. The second round had gone through the sling of his weapon. And the third round had hit him just above the fiberglass plate, right, right on his heart. And it had spun him around so hard that his equipment had flown off. And all good credit to him. He came up and refused to get in the ambulance. He said, "No, I patrolled out. I'm patrolling back in." And when he got back to camp, the 7.62 short round was in the top pocket of his, his parachute smock, his combat jacket.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah, I was, as wrong as it sounds, because obviously I have a very different view on conflict now, but I was glad to have experienced something during my 7 years. I wouldn't have wanted to leave and not seen action, you could say, although that's probably, I don't know if that's, I suppose that's the ego in me talking. And that was that. And then I went up to the Arctic. I did Arctic warfare training. I earned my parachutist wings, so I was paratrained, and I saw my time out on an aircraft carrier, or my next phase rather, where I was on a high security detachment on an aircraft carrier. There were just 12 Marines on a ship that went to sea with 2,300 people, I think it was. And we sailed to Barbados, which was just unbelievable.
Nice.
We sailed to the States. We went all around the Mediterranean. It was a dream year for me. And we were the first ship to have women on board as well. So it was, it's kind of all these stinky matlows, which is the Navy, going down for scran, which is food, wearing, aftershave and stuff. So
Yeah. It's like, what are you guys doing? You guys smell good. What the hell's going on? I don't know.
sorry, I should apologize to my fellow seamen there. I wasn't being rude. I'm just saying, when you're at sea and you blokes, it doesn't matter so much. But now it was kind of, things were a bit more on the line. And
Make sure you clean up before going to dinner.
Yeah.
Clip your nails. Have some aftershave on.
I started seeing one of the Wrens, that's the Women's Royal Navy Service. I started seeing one of the girls, and we hired a Jeep in Barbados. This little mini moke is based on a mini chassis. So it's like a, not much bigger than a go-kart. And we went off and just explored the island, and it was paradise. It was just the whole thing. It was just unbelievable. And anyway, then I was posted back to Plymouth, where I bought a house. It's in the southwest of England, which is where my family live anyway. And the last 4 years of my service, I built an international network marketing business, which went really successful in Hong Kong. And I left to move over there. And within 7 months of being in Hong Kong, I was chronically addicted to crystal meth. My business had just totally collapsed, not through any fault of my own. The products we were getting just dried up, and I had no choice but to walk away. And to make things more interesting, I was phasing in and out of clinical psychosis. And after about 5 months of being in and out of psychosis and not really not realizing it, I was working in a nightclub in a district called Wan Chai in Hong Kong, if anyone's ever heard of the book or the film Susie Wong, I can't remember this, that's not the full title, but The Life and Times of Susie Wong or something. That's where that is set. It's a red light district. Well, it's a girly bar district. It's a gangland district. It's the nightclub district. And I worked in a club. I call it Club Nemo in my book. And on the first night there, one of the English expats in the club said, he pointed to my two fellow doormen, said, they're all triads, Chris, don't you? And that was that. My ears just pricked up, and I was fascinated. I come from essentially a gang of tattooed men who like to fight. And now when I was homeless on my backpack and verging in and out of mental illness and chronically addicted. I've now got this, a boys' gang have adopted me. They've given me a job as their doorman. They put money in my pocket. They're taking me out for breakfast. I was never a triad or anything like that, Dad. I've never claimed to be. Various media things pick up on my story and they say, hey, Hong Kong millionaire to, Royal Marine millionaire to triad. And it's like, I've never said any of that stuff, although my business did turn over around about $100,000 one month. So that was that. So cut a long story short, and to get onto the adventure stuff, it culminated. My mental illness in Hong Kong got so bad one night, I became convinced that the commando crawl that we learned in the Marines, which is where you lay on your stomach on a rope and you can crawl across a cavern with your rifle slung over your back and all your equipment on. I became convinced the reason we'd been taught that is I needed to shin across this cable between my skyscraper and the skyscraper on the other side of the Jaffe Road. And I went up on the roof where I used to love going up on the roof and checking in the vista and, practicing my kung fu. I was always like high as a kite, If people would look and laugh at me, I'd go over to the edge. There was a parapet around the edge and I'd just do a handstand, up on the parapet. And this time I went up there and I was just totally in psychosis. I thought when I get across this cable, and it's, we're talking 70 meters above the ground. It's an old cable. It was actually carrying a water pipe to the other building. You get a lot of the homeless population lives on the rooftops in Hong Kong, not on the streets like they do, where we live. They live on the rooftops. And so it's not unusual to have this kind of weird, setup. Mm-hmm. But of course, I didn't know how this cable was fixed. I wasn't even like in the right mindset to go and even have a look and check. And it certainly wasn't. Shake. Yeah, it certainly wasn't set up to carry a human. And cut a long story short, I started crawling out on it. And I honestly, in my mind, believed when I got to the other side, I was going to get all the answers in life. Everyone I knew was going to be waiting over there for me. And they was going to be like, hey, Chris, welcome home, buddy. We put you to the test and, it's been hard but you've come through it with flying colors and welcome to the club, club of life. And I thought the triads would be there going, we were, putting you to the test in the nightclub, because things got really weird in there at times, Dave. There would be fights kick off, blood spraying around, and then I'd find a blood capsule on the floor and I'd be like, what the hell just happened? Right. I saw one guy got the hell beaten out of him. And what these two triads that I work with, the two triad doormen, I mean, they were all triads, but these were the triad doormen. What they hadn't noticed is this slip of paper had fallen out this guy's pocket when they were kicking the hell out of him. So when they ran after him out of the club, I went and picked it up, and it was the list of racehorses. So obviously, he'd been in the club punting the names of hooky race courses, probably for another triad. My triad was the one I worked for was the 14K. There was the Sun Eon.
There's more than one. I thought triads. Just the triads, like that's it.
Yeah, the Sun Eon is another famous triad. The Woe Hop Toe is another one. There's many, and then there's also kind of groups that want to be triad, or they've just set themselves up as triad. And so I got crawling out on this cable, and cut a really long story short, I started to think about my little brother, who I hadn't spoken. I love my brother to bits. We've been through an awful lot of shit growing up together, and he was, like my best friend. And I realized I hadn't spoke to him for almost a year. I've been so self-obsessed with this drug business, and where can I get? And they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know that at this current moment, your brother or your son is on a cable trying to prove himself to fucking who knows who, crawling across this cable 70 meters above the ground in Hong Kong. And then I thought, what if the cable snaps? They're going to tell my family that I died addicted to drugs in Hong Kong, and I threw myself off a skyscraper.
Yep.
And it wasn't true, Dave. Even though I was in a hell of a state, I never lost respect for myself. My self-esteem took a massive hit because this carried on another 18 months. When I got back to the UK, I lived in absolute squalor, and that was enough to trigger. I'd say that was my first nervous breakdown. And I just started crying uncontrollably on this wire and thinking, who the hell am I trying to prove stuff to, and why? I don't need to prove myself to anyone in this world, only my kid brother. And with that, I just crawled backwards off this cable and I went back to my apartment, this shoddy little apartment in this terribly rundown tenement building. I loved it. I was living how, like the Bruce Lee movies, it was just, but no one else would. And you never get a foreigner living where I was. They would have just turned their nose up and, all the rats and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, I went back and I smashed this place up. All the stuff I carefully bought with what little money I had, and this ornate Chinese box that had mother of pearl, and I just smashed it up and I cried my eyes out. And then the door knocked. It was the police. For God knows how many run-ins now I'd had with the police. It was quite a few. And he just looked at me and said, why you smashed the place up? Why you smashed the place up again? He said, everyone in Hong Kong know you. Everyone know you take the drug. Don't take the drug. And then he just spun around and disappeared. And with that, Dave, I just cried some more. I was like, what the hell I'm in psychosis, trying to make sense of everything. So to get to the adventuring, back in the UK, I slept on a sofa bed, a filthy sofa bed on the floor. I had to shoplift for my food because all my money went on the gear. The clothes I wore, I had stolen off a heroin dealer. I had marks all up my arm from injecting. And I really was, if you've ever seen the film Trainspotting,
yep,
I was way worse than that because them guys kept it together. I was just I was a mess. And I had kept having these nervous breakdowns where just everything would pour out of me. And the fourth one I had was pretty pertinent because I woke up on the floor. I was just in my boxer shorts. I was shivering. I was freezing. Sometimes I wouldn't sleep for 9 days and I wouldn't eat anything either, except maybe, cram a McDonald's breakfast down or just something to keep going. And I'd become emaciated and dehydrated and lost so much weight. And I woke up on the floor. I was shivering cold. And it used to take me quite a while to remember who I was. I don't mean like, metaphorically. I mean, like I couldn't remember. I'd sit up and think, who am I? And then I'd be like, oh, Chris, I'm cool, Chris. This is what days of exhaustion does to you. And I was like, right, I'm Chris. I don't know my surname, but at least I know I'm Chris, And I'm sat there shivering on the floor, and I amazingly had like 86p, 86 cents left in my wallet, which was unusual. And I thought, right, I'm going to go out and get a pie to eat. And there was a corner shop just down the road, a convenience store just down the road. And I could hear the children kicking a football around outside my house. And I knew the second I went out the door, they'd all come running up to me and be like, Chris, come and play football with us. And like I was the only adult, Dave, in the street that ever gave them any time. All the other adults treated these kids like they were a fucking pain in the ass, right? And I'd always just like gone above and beyond to, treat them with the respect kids deserve, the respect that I didn't get as a child, And I'd go out trick or treating with them. I knew all their parents, but now I'm like ashamed to go out the front door. I'd be so shell shocked and embarrassed if someone said, like, Chris, what's wrong with you? You don't, you've kind of really changed, mate, since that handsome 14 stone bodybuilding Marine who used to drive a, almost brand new BMW and had a mobile phone when nobody even knew, nobody knew what these things were. Right. And I know that's all materialistic bullshit, but at least I had materialistic bullshit back then. Now I had nothing. I was living in a house that was so heavily like in debt now and everything. And it was a seminal moment in my life because I suddenly was forced to reflect, what have I done? What have I done? My God, how did I think this was going to end well? Where did that delusion kick in? Yeah, the substances, they were fun at first, I learned so much about myself. I, realized I can write. I'm a best-selling author now. I realized that through substance, abuse. I realized I was a really good dancer. I
Really?
realized, I can draw, I can paint amazingly. I've just figured how to do it, and it was good in the beginning, but I'd continued that party way after everyone else had gone home. It was that simple. And then I thought of myself as a child, that like toddler that went through loads of stuff that no toddler really should go through. The little toddler that cried when his tortoise died and prayed that it would come back to life because he was, my tortoise was my best friend, Dave, for all the nonsense, and I just start crying for that little kid. And then I stopped and I thought, who's abusing that little kid now? It's me, isn't it? It's the adult. It's me. I'm abusing me. I'm doing this to myself. And in that moment, it was just like an epiphany. Epiphany's an understatement. It just suddenly hit me. Oh, God, dude, what have you done? You've got to change this. You've got to get your self-respect back, mate. Because it wasn't that bad how you used to live. Even if, you was chasing the money or what. And now, and so I made a promise, and I didn't understand at the time the promises I was making are the foundation of enlightenment. I said, I'm going to forgive people for the past. It wasn't their fault. They were abused as kids as well. And things come, down through but it's going to stop with me. I forgive, I look to the people that had done me wrong. I just looked to their good points, and there was a lot of them. And then I imagine the pain and the torture they'd been through, and they couldn't speak about it. That generation, they kept everything to themselves. They was ashamed of themselves that if they spoke out in the pub, that someone would judge them, and and
Weakness.
and I just felt for them. I thought, oh my God, and I got it, and that was enough. I could forgive them then. That was fine, and I could be grateful for their good side, and so that was that. So I left the past behind. It doesn't exist. I then said, I'm going to be grateful for this life. A lot of my Marine buddies were dead by this stage through horrible, hideous accidents, whether that's being shot dead in conflict or, knocked off motorbike by a car or suicide or running away from the police and getting spiked on a fence. And just, we had 2 lads killed surfing a train in Thailand. And I'm there, Dave, and I'm thinking, do you know what? What would they give to be here now where I am? They'd give everything, wouldn't they? And what would they not be doing? They wouldn't be shoving bloody drugs in their arm.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So come on, Chris, sort it out, mate. And I said, right, tomorrow morning, I'm gonna sleep off this come down off the drugs. And tomorrow when I wake up, instead of just rolling over and going to sleep for another 3 days or whatever, and I'm going to wake up, I'm going to throw open the curtains. I'm going to say, good morning, son. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity called life. And then the next time I go out and score, I'm going to spend £10. Instead of spending all of my benefits money, which at the time wasn't a lot. It was sort of £60 a week or something. Instead of spending it all, no.
Well.
Yeah. I'm going to spend £10. I'm going to, they call it acting out. You know, I'm going to do the thing and be hyper and, you know, think I'm going to get loads of stuff done in my life, but I won't. And I recognize that now. And then I'm going to crash. And then I'm going to wake up and I'm not even going to think about buying anymore. I'm going to spend that money on food. I'm going to have some food in my cupboard for the first time. I lived on porridge oats and pasta mixed together with margarine, the cheapest margarine. It used to be like 17 cents from the supermarket. And I put anything up to 20 sugars on just because I was so craving energy. And then I'd microwave it. And then I can't tell you, I'd eat it like a wild animal. That's how starving I was all the time. Right. And so that was that. And so then the next morning I woke up, everything in my head said, go back to sleep and ignore this nightmare. But that same thing again, that little voice that got me in the Marines said, no, do what you said you would do. I got up, I threw open the curtains. I said, morning, son. Thank you so much for this opportunity called life. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go and make a nice cup of tea instead of, the other. I went to the kitchen, and as I turned around, Dave, I honestly tell you this, wasn't I? Something was with me. And when I say something, it was like a bigger picture up there. Mm-hmm. And I knew that it's not my problems anymore. This thing has got it covered for me. All I've got to do is just keep doing what I'm doing, trust in the process, walk my path. I don't compare myself anymore to anybody else. Yes, I've got friends that were driving expensive cars and big hat. That's their shit. I'm going to be happy if I sit in the garden with the sun on my face, drinking a cup of tea in poverty. If that's my deal, that's my deal, and I can live with that. And what I didn't know is I'd made some of the fundamental rules of life. I was starting to understand, even without knowing it, energy, vibration, and frequency. And energy is, if you take action, life meets you at that action. It meets you at that, that higher level. If you go out the front door in the morning miserable, you're going to make everyone miserable that you meet. If you go out smiling and happy, you perk everyone up that you meet, and life gives to you. And then off that springboard, your vibration raises, and then life comes and it gives you some more. And that started happening almost immediately. I joined a tobacco smuggling ring, and we would go to Belgium. Yeah, we'd drive over to Belgium, fill the car with as much tobacco. It wasn't tax-free. You paid tax in Belgium, but it was like nothing compared to the UK. And so we had all this super cheap tobacco. We'd drive it back through the Channel Tunnel. Well, you don't drive, you get on a train in the Channel Tunnel. We'd dump it at a B&B, at a hostel in Dover, go back over on the train, drive through France, hit Belgium again, fill up with the car again. Then we go back, stuff the car, have it all on our laps, bulging out the trunk and everything. And we drive back home, and then the guy that ran our gang, he'd sell it to all his sort of, and here's the thing, suddenly I've got money in my pocket. It wasn't a lot, it wasn't, like drug dealer or anything. I wasn't going to get rich off it, but it was, £60 for a trip or something. And of course, I wasn't spending the money on the stuff anymore. Before I knew it, I had food in my cupboard, and I bought new clothes. And I can't tell you the amazing feeling of wearing new clothes. It was just insane. And so that was that. And what it did, it set me on a pathway to live, work, and travel in 86 countries across all 7 continents. I used the tobacco money to train as a volunteer development instructor, so I could volunteer to work with street children in post-war Mozambique. So I taught kids on the beach there for 6 months. They then asked me to drive volunteer journalists to India and back from Norway on an old school bus, so we could write articles about communities in poverty. And then, I graduated in youth work. I got a degree in youth work. I backpacked through every single country in North, Central, South America. I took my pilot's license. I took my skydiving license, advanced scuba diving license. I wrote 6 books. One of them was an international bestseller. Like you say, I ran the length of the country. I did the quadruple Ironman. I ran across the Sahara Desert. I rode across the Atlantic in January. I started what I believe is, obviously next to yours, the best podcast in the world.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that.
I've, I've, I've got a family. If anyone ever doubts why you have to fail in life, come and meet my son. Then you'll understand. I did everything perfectly. I played my hand, and I won everything, Dave. I won everything. And yeah, I've scuba dived in the Antarctic Polar Circle on expedition down there. I've just done everything on this planet that I ever wanted to do, and I'm still doing it. I'm now training to climb Mount Everest in April so I can keep raising awareness of veterans' mental health. And I keep studying the enlightenment path, and I found it fascinating. I'm learning all about the Eastern mysticism and the scripture. I've got an amazing book here. It's called The Dictionary of All Scripture and Myth. And it tells you what the Bible actually means, not what they tell you in church, which makes no sense whatsoever. All of it, from what I understand, it all relates to your body's bioelectrical chemistry. That's it,
This is, Chris, I have to say that this has been like an incredible conversation, right? Because you're talking about the things that I'm starting to realize slowly through my own journey. But ultimately, what you're saying, and I had to come to this realization on my own as well, and all the folks I've talked to that have gone through struggle and have overcome, nobody can do this for you. Everything has to come from within. That voice, and this is where enlightenment, and you're further along the path than I am, the enlightened way, most people turn from, right? Because that voice when you were a kid, you could have just said, fuck it, I'm not listening to this. I'm not going for this run. Or when you're climbing that rope or that sky bridge, you just said, I'm going to keep on going, or just never done anything. Each time that voice spoke to you, you listened. And it doesn't speak to you very often. I think that's where most people, what am I going to do with my life? You got to be patient. And the interesting thing is you never had any training, right? This wasn't something, it doesn't seem like you had a strong religious upbringing. It doesn't seem like you were reading anything that was related to enlightenment, either before the Royal Marines, during, or after. But through your experiences, it has guided you to these teachings. And that type of journey, nobody can buy that. Nobody can recreate that. That is 100% through life experience, which is the beauty of life. And I think you really encapsulated what that beauty is, right? It's the struggle, the failure, the humility that comes with it, and the acceptance and the forgiveness. And that's just the moment where it kind of all sinks in. But I don't think it's something that can happen overnight, and it's not something that happens without struggle. And I think that's where a lot of folks, and especially, and you could probably chat about this later, especially working with the veteran community. I think a lot of us just feel like, well, I did my time. I've struggled in the military. It should just be here. I should just have it. I should just have clarity. I should just know. And that's the frustration, and that can lead to all kinds of issues down the road. And ultimately, I think a lot of folks, and this is something I think we're going to have to touch base on another chat, is this concept of you're no longer that warrior in the war, and now you're outside in this crazy, unstructured, chaotic world. And now your meaning and your purpose is completely different. And that's the thing that I struggled with the most. And that's why I started this podcast. And the fact that you just mentioned, hey, I found this new thing about the Bible and like it's a true interpretation. That is the same path that I'm on too. I had a religious awakening only a few months ago. I was on a retreat in Mexico, and I'd been going back towards my Christian roots. And I had a full on experience. And like you said, like you had a presence with you. I had a conversation and it was profound. And ultimately what it told me was, you're okay. I got you. Go do more good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that just, I wept, and it was the calmest I've been since I've been home from Afghanistan. And I can't really explain it better than that until like somebody has their own experience, and folks have noticed I'm calmer. And that's the only way I can really put it into words, is that I know somebody is looking out for me, and I can put my faith in that. And that has completely changed my outlook on life and the way I do my shows, and the way I essentially tell myself that I can do what I love because I know it'll be okay. And so that message really rang true for me. And there's so many good points there that I think we're going to have to do a part 2 on this, Chris.
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. So Chris, before I let you go here, where can folks start reading some of your content, start buying some of your books, and get better dialed into your podcast?
Yeah, so my podcast, the easiest way is just type Chris Thrall into YouTube or into a search engine, and it's all going to come up. Any support I can get for my upcoming Mount Everest summit, I'd really appreciate, whether that's just a small donation or help share my social media posts, or corporate sponsorship if there's anyone out there that wants to support. It's all our veterans, this is the beauty of the internet these days. I'm not just doing this for English veterans or UK veterans. It's the same message. And my book, my first memoir, is called Eating Smoke. That's all about my psychosis in Hong Kong. I promise you a good read. I've subsequently written 2 more memoirs, and I've kind of got this thing, Dave, I'm not going to write a book unless it's good. I know good is subjective, but I've got a sort of bar that I set for myself. Yeah. And my website's a bit of a mess at the moment because I'm rejigging it because of the Everest climb. But yeah, you can
I
find
love it,
out.
man. I'm going to borrow this layout from mine. I really think this is slick. I know exactly where to go. It's clean. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
You've inspired me.
Yeah. And so that's it, folks. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the platforms. I've got I've got a Patreon, and every month I've got Patreon, YouTube memberships, and locals. And the reason I mention this is for just $1.99 a month. So that's like $3, right? We have a meeting every month, and we sit down and we put the world to rights. And we, my supporter friends, they ask me what's on their mind. The biggest one is always, my friends don't understand me, and they call me conspiracy theorist. And I help them to understand that, well, first off, you've only been conditioned to call them friends because that's what we used to believe, wasn't it? But what is a real friend? A real friend, someone who loves and respects you, and will reserve judgment if you have differences, because they know, they've got your best interests at heart. And secondly, as long as you seek your validation from human relationships, you're going to struggle, because human beings are weak at the best of times. As soon as you start tapping into the eternal energy, which I've explained how I did it. And when you learn to just click your fingers and that's it, you're zoned in. This is what meditation really is. It's the ability to shut off the noise and become one with the all, the everything, because that's what you are. You're a manifestation of the divine. You're a microcosm of the macrocosm. You're a holographic representation of God. That's it. But you're not going to know it until you learn to switch off and be quiet, shut all the human noise in the material world out. And, when you realize you're divine, then you haven't got time to be worrying about human relationships. That would be blasphemy. That would be silly and futile. And you getting your strength from something much stronger that's never going to leave you, and it's never going to let you down, So that's it. I always say, friends, if you listen to this, You're born a legend. You'll go on in this life at the end of it, whatever, I believe you'll go back to the eternal energy as a legend. It's just up to you whether you choose to realize you're a legend in between. And I know that you are. So there you go.
Inspiring words, Chris. Inspiring words. This is great, man. I truly, really appreciate you and what you're doing, and the fact that you're spreading the good word and getting people inspired and connecting the dots, which we so desperately need these days, is really noble. So thanks so much for having a chat here and explaining your story. And we're definitely going to have to do part two and get into the adventure side of things and a little bit more of the spiritual side and the spiritual awakening that's happening on your end, and share that with the folks here in Canada and the US. So Chris, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate your time. And folks, don't forget to train hard, fight easy. We'll see you on the next one.